everybody. Welcome to another episode on the experience. Now, things going to be a little bit different today because the last time we spoke, that was just an introduction. Today is one of those days when you are definitely going to need your book and your pencil because today is a learning day. Now, what we want to do with this video today is we are going to get into the details of Jamaican Creole. Because remember, we said the content that we're going to be doing here is something that gets us to be in tune with Caribbean culture, and we are going through Jamaica to get there. In today's video, we are going to be looking at the phonetics and phonology of Jamaican Creole. And that simply means we are going to be talking about the sounds that we find in Jamaican Creole. We're going to break down talking about the vowels and the consonants. We are going to talk about what is allowed and what isn't. Now, it sounds technical, but for the time being, bear with me because our intention is to take the most technical components of the language and make it clear and understandable. So what is today's video? What are some of the things that we want to get done? We are going to cover the characteristics of Jamaican Creole. And when we talk about the characteristics of Jamaican Creole, we want to basically familiarize you with the sounds, the features of Jamaican Creole. We want to explore the sound system. So we want to talk about, as I said, mentioned earlier, the vowels. We want to talk about the consonants. We're going to be providing examples. We want to get the sound of the language in terms of what do you have in your particular language that overlaps with what exists in Jamaican Creole. But at the same point in time, what also exists in your language that you don't have, that isn't found in Jamaican Creole? What is a replacement for it? We are going to try to see if we can get some syllables. We're going to talk about the syllable structure of Jamaican Creole. Now, this part, I'm not promising that we're going to go in detail because if it is needed, by all means, we can do a part two. What we want to do is to ensure that we have a clear understanding of where a word starts, where it ends. And sometimes based on natural speech, we have several words running into each other. And we have to establish syllable boundaries to ensure that we get what is the actual pronunciation, just to not confuse it with particular words. And I also mentioned in an introductory video that we want to ensure that the material we record can be used as an educational resource. So for the teachers, what we want to do is to do a mini comparison of the sounds in Jamaican Creole that exist in English, but also to cover those that don't and what their counterparts are. So a few notes on Jamaican Creole phonology. What we have today as Jamaican Creole, and don't think that we only have one variety or the language sounds only one way. It depends on a number of things. It depends on where you're from. It depends on other languages in your domain and in your space. So for example, what other languages are in contact with Jamaican Creole in your space? So me coming from the bush is not going to I'm not going to always sound like someone from Kingston because there are different influences, there are different languages in the space. Now, the several different varieties of Jamaican Creole we have historically have different sources. So, for example, we are going to start with the technical terminology, but don't worry, we are going to break them down. So we can have, in linguistics, we talk about the substrate language. And the substrate language varies depending on the contact situation. So within the Caribbean, when we talk about the languages that were in contact that gave rise to Jamaican Creole, the substrate language would have been considered the African languages. Now, different Creoles were formed in different places. So don't think that the Caribbean is the only place you find Creoles. And based on where the language is located, where the Creole is found, the substrate will vary. But in a typical sense, when we talk about the substrate language, we often refer to the the African languages. So what we have as Jamaican Creole today has its source in the substrate language. So a variety of African languages. We have the superstrate language, and again, the superstrate language will vary. But in most cases, when we talk about the superstrate language, we are talking about the European language that was in the contact space at that point in time. So if so for Jamaica, Jamaican Creole, the superstrate language would be English. Saint Lucian, French Creole, French. These are some of the things that we are going to be covering because I want you to understand the result of what we have today as Jamaican Creole. The sources are many. We can also talk about add straight languages. And when we talk about languages, we are add straight languages. We are talking about languages after the fact, after the formation process, those languages that would have that are still in contact. So for example, an add straight language would be also an African language. That African languages that are in contact at a later date. So after the formation. So for example, we have Creole languages still interacting with other languages in contemporary society. So an African language that is in contact now with Jamaican Creole would be classified as an adstrate language, which is different from a substrate language, which is a language that would have been in contact during the formative period of the language, of the Creole. We have what we classify as language universals, and these are principles that are applied to every single language. So regardless of which language, it doesn't have to be a Creole. English, French, Spanish, Dutch, German, all these languages share common features that exist as a result of language universals. So for example, when we start covering the vowel system of Jamaican Creole, one of the things that you'll find is that there are going to be sounds in Jamaican Creole that you will find in every other language, right? Um, we have internal phonological changes. When speak, we speak for the basis of, we speak with the intention of everything flowing seamlessly. So for what we classify as ease of articulation, when we are communicating, we don't speak in words. Our language flow. Our language flows. And as a result, there are certain processes that we are going to be covering that lead to particular changes. So, for example, when we talk about assimilation, all we are talking about is that there are particular sounds in an environment, and for ease of articulation, the one sound will undergo a change so that the speech will flow seamlessly. We have other sources that we can't easily recognize. And for these, we are going to classify them as unrecognized sources because not everything we have an explanation for. Right? And we all these things that we don't have a clear cut source for, we are going to group them under other. And this may need further research for us to figure these things out. Now, when we talk about the the phonology of Creoles, and we're not talking about just Jamaican Creole now. When we're talking about Creoles in general, some of the languages some Creoles, they will mirror the phonology of their superstrate. So, for example, Trinidadian English Creole, or well, let's stick with Trinidadian English Creole. Trinidadian English Creole is one of those languages where the sounds that are found in the language are almost similar to those that exist in the lexifier, which for Trinidadian English Creole, the lexifier is the same as Jamaican Creole, which is English. You have some languages where there's a stark difference between the sound systems in the Creole and the lexifier language or the superstrate language. All right. So there's a clear deviation. And why is that? Because it more resembles the substrate. Remember, the substrate in this case is the African languages. So, for example, if we take Saramakan, a Creole in Suriname, its vowel and its consonant system does not resemble English. it will start resembling some of the African languages in the space. And then you have other languages where the source is unknown. Why? Because we can't say it is from the superstrate, we can't say it is from the substrate. So there are other sources for what we find in the language. All right. Now, when we go back to Jamaican Creole, what we have as Jamaican Creole now, regardless of which dialect or which variety of the language, which variety of Jamaican Creole you're interacting with, what we have is that it historically represents the output, the slave population, the speakers of West African languages, the slaves of West African languages. It's their adjustment, and I'm using the term adjustment loosely, their adjustment to what is found in English. So the variety of English that they would have been interacting with at a particular period, they their adjustment to that English would give some output of Jamaican Creole. And we are going to be talking about this and drawing reference to it as we move forward. English is where we get majority of the words from in Jamaican Creole. So we said the vocabulary of Jamaican Creole is typically from English. And there are some changes that the language will undergo and those words will undergo that will make them different from Jamaican Creole as opposed to English. Now, when we take Jamaican English, not Jamaican Creole now, Jamaican English, the variety, the language that you find in formal domains, there are going to be overlaps with other varieties of English. So if you compare Jamaican English with a British English or Australian English, there are overlaps. There are sounds that you are going to find. But at the same point in time, what makes Jamaican English so unique is the sounds that you won't find in any other dialect or any other variety of English, right? So the pronunciation of words in Jamaican Creole are going to be distinguished. They vary along different lines when you compare them to the superstrate. And another label for the superstrate is what we classify as the lexifier. In linguistics, a lexical item is a word. That means the lexifier language is the language where majority of the words or the vocabulary are from. And some of these sounds are identical in Jamaican Creole as they exist in English. And again, they may deviate at some point in time. Jamaican Creole and English are two separate systems. What do we mean? We often hear words in English from English in Jamaican Creole, and we often consider them to be Jamaican, and that we're speaking English. But don't get it confused. Words will overlap. So when you look at a word like teacher, that's English. In its source. But when you pronounce it, a simple thing that you have to take into consideration, that ER pronunciation at the end deviates. So in English, you'll get teacher, but in Jamaican Creole, that ER is going to change to A. And you get a hard as a teacher becomes teacher. All right? And these are, as we said, these are things that we're going to come across. Because we recognize that these are two different languages. Sometimes we accept that fact, other times we don't. But these are two different languages with two different systems, with two different set of rules governing them. And as a result, sometimes we try to speak. So sometimes once you put a camera on someone, the first thing that we tend to adjust is how we sound, and sometimes to our own detriment. Because if you are familiar with a couple of years ago, you would have had that Clifton, Clifton Brown became a, and this was long before we had influencers. Clifton Brown, Clifton was an influencer. And but why? Because of the fact that he recognized, he was doing an interview with, I can't remember which news station it was, but Clifton recognized the norms of interaction, which is once there's a camera, you have to adjust your speech to um, not only say that you're speaking English, but sound as though you are speaking English. And that didn't go too well because there was a intermingling of Jamaican pronunciation with English pronunciation, and you will get pronunciations that obviously are not recognized as natural Jamaican Creole or Jamaican English speech, and that then created a sensation. So we try to keep these things separate, and sometimes to our own detriment, we end up sounding as though we don't speak any language at all because we are mixing and matching. The phonetics and phonology, the sounds and the rules that govern these sounds to be discussed in this video are going to be based on what we classify as basilectal Jamaican Creole. Now, what is basilectal Jamaican Creole? Jamaican Creole, each person's speech exists on what we classify as a continuum. See it as a line. And now at one end, you are going to have the acrolect, which is the closest form of English, right? So in often cases, people classify standard English as being at the acrolectal end. In the middle, which is where you find features of English being mixed with features of Creole, we classify that as a mesolect, which is the mid version, the midpoint. And then you have the basilect. The basilect is the most deviant, or the variety that deviates the furthest from English. So where I am from, the bush, is basilectal Jamaican Creole that I am accustomed to. And you hear that around you. And sometimes when you step elsewhere, they often ask you where you're from, because you don't sound like someone from Senti, don't sound like somebody from Kingston. Now, one of the things I want you to be able to do is not just to speak the language, but I also want you to be able to write it. When we write, each person has their own unique way of spelling Jamaican. But we are going to formalize it here. We are going to put some, for the sake of argument, some standardness to the writing. So one of the things that you'll come to realize is, as we go through the sound systems, we're going to be interacting with how you would spell it as well. And there's a system in place for that. Years ago, Robert LePage and Frederick Cassidy, these are two linguists. In different places, you'll hear it be referred to as different names. So we can talk about the Cassidy writing system. You hear it being referred to as the Cassidy-LePage writing system. What we have is that they created a system of spelling and writing Jamaican Creole. And because it has features that overlap with other Creoles, it can be used to spell and write other Creoles as well. Languages change. Jamaican Creole has changed over time in terms of its pronunciation as well. So at that point in time, when Cassidy and LePage would have used the Cassidy writing system in their dictionary, things have changed over that period of time. And the Jamaica language unit, based on the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies, they made some adjustments. So what you have today is the Cassidy JLU version of the writing system, and that's what we're going to be using to interact when we spell and when we write. If we have to spell and if we have to write, we are going to be using the Cassidy JLU system. All right. What is so unique about this system is that, though not perfect, each sound has its own symbol. So we say that there's a one-to-one representation of sound and symbol. Now, as we are going to see later on, sometimes it doesn't always have that one-to-one representation, but in most cases, it does. And we are going to be interacting with that. All right? Now, let's start language lesson on focusing on the vowel system or the vowel inventory of Jamaican Creole. The vowel system of Jamaican Creole tends to resemble that of English more than the consonant. And there are sounds in English that you find in Jamaican Creole, but there are also going to be vowels that are unique, that gives Jamaican Creole its unique edge in terms of how it sounds. Right? So this is not absolute, but Jamaican Creole has approximately 12 vowels, and we are going to go through them. So remember, take out this is a partner where you use your book and your pencil, because you don't know if you have a test or you have a quiz coming up later on. Some of these overlap with English. So you have the I, the E, the A, the O, and the O. Those are 5. And we classify those. So we say that there are 5 short vowels. E, A, O, O. All right? And we have 7 complex vowels. What makes them so complex? It's because what you find is a combination of individual vowel sounds that produce these complex vowels. Now, of these 7 complex vowels, 3 of them are long. So we have E, we have A, and we have O. All right? And if you are going to write it, all you have to do is to simply double the E. So E is a I, and the E as a result is going to be 2 I's. The A is 1 A, and A 2 A's. All right, good, you're following. So what then is the O? If the O is 1 U, then the O is, who can we guess? Two U's. So that is 5 short vowels and 3 long vowels. So far, how much we have? 8. All right. Then comes what we classify as diphthongs. Diphthongs are 2 individual short vowels combined to create that one single sound. So we have ear, e, e. We have I, which is a and e, and we have o, as in o and o, and we have o, which is o and o. Now, so in total, we have 12 vowels. This, as I said, this is not absolute because you have other varieties of Jamaican Creole that has its influence from other languages in its space that may yield other vowels. But in its most basic form, those are your 12 vowels. All right? Now, let's break them down and let's use them in words. So, the first short vowel is I. And you'll find it in the words like bigger. So, bigger. The I in the first syllable is that I vowel, that short I. We have E as in beggar. So be, the e is the second short vowel. We have a as we find in bamboo. So that ba is that a sound. We have o as in butter. Right? So that first, and so far what we have been focusing on are the first vowel sounds in each of these words. So be ga, we have be ga, we have ba bo, we have butter. And what's the last one we're missing so far? Exactly, the O. In words like bogo. What is bogo? Bogo is snot. Now, there's a difference between bogo and nose knot. And these are things that we are going to cover later on when we start looking at words and the lexicon of Jamaican Creole. But for the sake of the pronunciation, you get O as your fifth short vowel. So bo, go. And you find it in both the vowel parts. The first syllable, bo, and you have it in the second syllable, go. All right? Now let's look at some of the long vowels. How many long vowels did we say we have? Exactly, 3. So when you think about a word like meter, light meter, the me, that E sound that you hear is your long vowel, your first long vowel. So that's E. The R you find in words like barber. So yeah, whosoever cut your hair is your barber. And then you have the last long, your third long is oo. So in a word like youth, that's what you have. That oo sound is your third long vowel. Now, remember, when you're writing it, the O would just simply double it. So 2 U's give you O, 2 A's give you A, and 2 I's give you E. Now let's focus on the more complex vowels, what we classify as our diphthongs. And when you look at the spelling, that you get the first 2 letters in the word diphthong are D and I. So that gives you die. Now, though it's pronounced differently, the die indicates 2, right? The same way by indicates 2. So it tells you that there are 2 sounds that are used together and pronounced together as one vowel sound. So when you go dance and the selector say, turn on your lighter. Lighter is I. So you get A and A together. And when you are pronounced for ease of articulation, you get lie. So lighter. We also have A, as in the word pay. Now, if you take P-A-Y, in English, that vowel sound is A. So pay. But in Jamaican Creole, that long A sound doesn't exist. As a result, we have A. So in English, you pay your bills, but in Jamaican Creole, you pay your bill, right? You also have O. So when you get a word like motor in English, so the motor in your car. In Jamaican Creole, that O sound also doesn't exist. So oftentimes you find persons taking their O pronunciation and dropping it in Jamaican Creole and say they talk in Jamaican Creole. No, if you want to sound authentic, you are going to have to replace that O with that O. So motor. You also have both. So that o sound is what we get as our third complex, and then we have the flip, which is o. So when you hear somebody say, what am I talking about? That o sound is o and o together, and you get o. So let's do a quick recap of our vowels. We have e, a, o, right? That's 5. We have e, and o. That's 8. And then what we have as our complex, we have I, we have a, we have o, and we have o. And that's our 12 vowels, right? There are other unique pronunciations that you are going to hear, and this is what we tend to find in natural speech. So when you're talking to your friends and you hear friends on the corner having a conversation, what we have is certain sounds that when you hear it, you're like, there's something different here. What is it exactly? Um, for example, these are what we classify as nasal vowels. Now, remember we spoke about phonological processes. We are talking about processes that in natural speech automatically happen. Nasalization is one of them. Now, what do we classify as nasalization? A nasal sound is what typically comes through your nasal cavity as opposed to your oral cavity. So when you say I can close my mouth and pronounce realize so as in the word niam. That is because the air escapes through your nasal cavity. So whenever there's a nasal sound in the proximity or in the environment of the vowel, we see that that vowel will assimilate or take on the nasal characteristic or the nasal sound or the nasal quality. So for example, them, the word them, which is, spell it, them, D-E-M. Good job. When you think about the word them, there is at the end of the word. So that means there's a close, there's a high possibility that the vowel, the so notice in isolation, no nasalization. But them, you you can hear it slightly. Now, when you hear it off altogether, is in instances where that nasal sound can be deleted, and what is left assimilates, and it takes on that nasal quality. So when you talk about in rural Jamaican Creole or basilectal Jamaican Creole, you're going to hear people say, "What they did there, there," is the same thing as them. It's just that you delete the M, and what is left is DE, and that E now has that nasal quality to it. So you have words like de, you have words like one, you have words like in. All of these have some form of nasal quality to them. So you can hear persons say, "Where you want?" That is, they're asking you, "What do you want?" Now, let's put a pause here and talk about some of the sounds that you will hear in Jamaican Creole. Remember, we spoke about ease of articulation. It means that we don't want to force speech. We want to sound as natural as possible. And in that natural production, there are certain processes that will occur. Nasalization is one of them. So when you pronounce the word one, that T is deleted. And the fact that T is deleted, what is left is now the sound at the end of the syllable is a nasal, and it is going to pronounce. So in the absence of the T, there's some form of compensation. So you can hear the word one, but you can hear it in the word one. So if me I warn you, don't come over here. So I am warning you. Yeah. These are qualities that we have. Now we have variations, and the variations may be deliberately done for the sake of emphasis. You're in an air-conditioned room, and the place is cold. But if it is extremely cold, how do you capture the essence of cold from very cold without using the word very? You make some adjustments to your vowel. So remember that O sound that you hear in English is going to be changed. So in cold, it is cold, right? Now, cold is when the room is cold, but regular temperature. When it is extremely, you have some adjustment, you have some switching. We like to classify it as an interchanging of the two vowel sounds. Or all we do is to let the vowels vary. So cold is cold. But when the room is cold or extremely cold, we say it cowl. So cold versus cowl. The same thing you get. Your mother is old, but your granny or your great granny, owl. And as a result, that variation in pronunciation often creates what we classify as homophones, um, separate words that sound the same. So the extremely old individual, owl. But what else do you have as owl? Exactly. The animal, whatever you hear hooting in the night. And so owl and owl, no variation, but two different words. All right, and we have these type of variation. Now these are not common pronunciation. In which variety would you find it? The basilectal variety. So where I'm from, the rural Jamaica, you find these variations existing. Fluid speech. Remember, we don't speak in pauses. So in English, I can say, "Let me send you for it." Those are too many words. So what you'll find is in Jamaican Creole, I might say, "Come and send your feet." And what you hear at the end, what is the last word you hear? Feet. So person may stop and say, "Why are you sending somebody for a foot?" No. What you find is the word for and it. They are merged in fluid speech. So for, which becomes fi. And these are things that we're going to come across when we start looking at the grammar of Jamaican Creole. So we have merger in across the word boundary. We said there's an amalgamation of where we tend to ignore word boundaries. So you'll get words like seat. We're not talking about seat. It's see and it. When we start doing our linguistic analysis of music, these are things that artists manipulate. They understand that to get an actual rhyme scheme, they can navigate and manipulate how the word sounds to capture a rhyme pattern. We have other words like do and it. So if for and it creates feet, and see and it create feet, seat, All right, so let's start over. Because yeah, it can be it is in breaking it down, you are going to have some confusion. This is one of the reasons why you were supposed to be writing. So let's start over for the sake of you capturing everything. For, which becomes fi in Jamaican Creole. So fi plus it gives you good, feet. See plus it gives you seat. So what do you get with do plus it? Deet, negative. It's do it. Do it. And that is simply because of, and I think what I'm thinking that we will have is we'll definitely need to have a part two of Jamaican phonology. What is going to be so special about that version? We are going to focus on the linguistics, more of the linguistics. Because what I want you to understand is um, the terminologies for particular sounds. So a quick intro. We take a word, we take a sound, we take the word, the sound, bu. Yeah? Say bu. Now, in linguistics, when you are describing, we can describe the sound bu. But when we are because that is a consonant, when we are describing consonants, we start with their voicing. What do we mean? Rest your finger on your throat. When you pronounce the sound, if you feel vibration, now the heavy voice man them, relax. Because for you, everything will vibrate. But for the persons with regular sounding voice, rest your finger on your throat. And if there's any vibration when you actually pronounce the sound, we say that is a voiced sound. If there's none, we say it is a voiceless. So let's compare b. Feel that vibration? B. So b is a voiced sound. Now, what is the next thing? How else do we describe? What do you use to pronounce b? B, your lips. We say that b is a bilabial sound. Labial, lips. And bi, two. So that means both your lips. B. Um, and what is the last thing? Is the type of is how air escapes the mouth. We say that it's a plosive or a stop because when you pronounce it, you actually stop. The air that escapes your lip comes out in a with a sense of explosion. So b. So we say that b is a voiced, bilabial, plosive, or a stop. All right, and that's one of the reasons why we say we might need a second part to get you into the details of the ins and outs of the phonology and not necessarily the phonology, because when we talk about the phonology, we are talking about the allowable sequences that we'll find. But when we're talking about phonetics, we are talking about the sounds that exist. We are describing the sounds and we're identifying the sounds. So remember, 12 vowels. Now let's talk about the consonants. So before we move to consonants, let's complete the whole idea of do plus it. So we already said that do plus it produces do it or do it, but and not deet. And that has to do with that O. So why we switched to phonology and we were describing phonology is that O is produced with the rounding of the lips. Lips are included. Same like B. And what happens with ease of articulation is the rounding or the inclusion of the lips from the O in do actually produces a W sound. So why you don't get deet you and do it is because we have what we classify as an inclusion of a rounding. Includes element of rounding. So there is rounding assimilated in the ease of articulation. So that's one of the reasons why we need an next session on phonology, where we talk about some of these processes. Or we can use the songs as they appear to help. All right, so let's step away from here and jump into consonants. We know that there are multiple consonants. In any language, you typically find more consonants um, than vowels. All right? Um, Now, there are approximately, you hear me using the word approximately? That means we're not saying that there are absolutely, but there are approximately 21 consonants in Jamaican Creole. Um, when we say we in English, in linguistics, we may say that there are 21 phonemic consonants. Now, what we mean by phonemic, we say that these sounds, there are 21 distinguishable sounds that when you use them in a word. So, for example, when we take the word, what example we want to use? MAD and DAD. What is different in those two words? Just the first sound. So we say that M and D are phonemes because when you put them in a word, when you interchange them, or if you have what seems to be, if you keep everything else constant and just change those two sounds, then you are getting a totally different word altogether, a word with different meaning. Right? Now, remember when we were writing these sounds, when we spoke about the Cassidy writing system or the Cassidy JLU writing system, we said that there was a one-to-one representation. There's supposed to be. Now, to represent a word like a sound like sh, you get S and H. And this is this is one of the few places you find H being pronounced in Jamaican Creole, because in most instances, and I'll explain when, in most words, Jamaicans drop their H's. Now, not all Jamaicans. It's more Kingston to the eastern end of the country that will drop their H's. Rural Jamaicans pronounce their H's. So Kingston, HEAD is good, is head. So I have a headache. In country, you still have a headache. All right? But notice H in this is not what? Exactly. It's not phonemic. Because whether it exists, whether the H is present or not, the word and the meaning remains the same. All right? So, a nuance about Jamaican Creole is that in many instances, especially at the beginning of a word, we drop our H's. All right? N and G together represent that sound. So when you pronounce the word THINK, that is think. But in Jamaican Creole, and this is another feature that we are coming to soon, shortly, is we say think. So think, that sound we represent in writing by N and G. And we are going to practice as we move through. We are going to practice writing and for us to be able to read. So the perfect place to find a clear representation of Jamaican written, as how we are going to be spelling it, is the Jamaican Creole version of the Bible. In the Jamaican Creole version of the Bible, we use this writing system, the Cassidy JLU writing system. So when you hear somebody say, "I don't think she gonna do it," that think is spelled TINGK. All right, just to capture that sound, and we classify that as a velar sound. Why? Because it is pronounced towards the velum, and again, that means that is a, pronounce it. Is it voice or voiceless? Good. So it's voiceless. Now, a little trick. We say that all nasal sounds, sorry, it's not voiceless, it's voiced. All nasal sounds are voiced. So when we think about the we say that it's a voiced, velar because of where it is pronounced, and it's a nasal. So it doesn't come through the oral cavity, it comes through the nasal cavity. So we say it's a nasal sound. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, H in at the beginning of the word of words, you can pronounce it or you don't have to. It's up to you on what is natural. And that's why we said ease of articulation. Now, sometimes um, because we know that in English, when you are in the classroom, you have to put back that H when you're speaking English. So when you're talking to your friends, you have a headache. But when in the classroom, you have a headache. Now, sometimes we overcompensate. We will put a H where it is not supposed to go. So sometimes, for some persons, what you crack and fry is a what? Yeah, is a egg. But for some persons, it's a egg. Why? Because it's an overcompensation because we know that we are supposed to put back the H where it's where we removed it. And sometimes we end up putting it where it's not supposed to be. All right. Now, one of the things that we often find with the consonants of Jamaican Creole is that we are going to have, just like there is in the vowel, there are sounds that do not exist. There are consonants that we don't produce. Now, let's take, and we're spelling now. In TH, words with TH, that TH isn't pronounced. And this is not unique to Jamaican Creole. It just depends on what you replace it with. So remember when we talk about voice and voiceless, put your finger here again. If the sound if the TH gives you a voiceless sound, in Jamaican Creole, we replace that TH, that voiceless TH with a T, with a T, right? So that's why I remember the word think earlier, when we're pronouncing that in Jamaican Creole, it's think, right? But only that TH is pronounced, is replaced with a T only if the sound is voiceless. If the TH is voiced, if you feel that vibration, because remember when you say no vibration, but when you say vibration, now when you get that voiced, when you feel that vibration when you're pronouncing that TH, when you're replacing that TH sound in Jamaican Creole, you don't use a T, you use a D. So as a result, the man over there is your father. But in Jamaican Creole, what is it? Don't tell me your daddy. We are talking with the words. You get your father. So that TH, that voiced TH now gives you a D. I saw a video where someone said, "Oh, you just replace your THs with a D." No, because then you're going to get words like dink, which if you replace your TH, all TH with a D, then you're going to get words like dink when you're supposed to be getting words like think. Start practicing that voice and voiceless. So gives you T, and the gives you a D. And it depends on where you're from, because my St. Lucian friends, you replace that voiceless not with a T but with a F. So that so sometimes you might hear a St. Lucian, and this is how you identify it. So it's the nuances in pronunciation that allows you to identify where someone is from. So, for example, where I would say think, a St. Lucian would say think. And as a result, what do you think their voiced counterpart will be? Exactly. V. Right? So, where we pronounce D, they will say V. All right? So these are again nuances in the language um, that we are going to have. What else? We have instances where certain consonants um, can be pronounced differently. So um, sometimes we replace B's or replace V's with B's. So river in some versions, some dialects of Jamaican Creole, we say riba. So you hear the person talk about riba muma, which is a mermaid. Um, that you don't get that v sound. It is actually a b. There are other sounds that you are going to get. And what I want us to do now is to run through and go through some of the consonant sounds. Same thing we did with the vowels. We are going to do that with the consonants. So we have b, um, as in exactly bigger. We are going to have d, as in daddy. We have f, as in your friend. We have g, so we have that g, which is represented by a g, um, in words like gully. It depends if you want to pronounce or not pronounce your h's. But when you pronounce your h's, h we can have as one of our vowels. Then we have k. Now, what is so unique about k is that in English, that we use the letter C to replace, when we spell in certain words, we use C, especially regardless of how it sounds. So, for example, the word certain starts with a, in English, a C. But if you are spelling certain in Jamaican Creole, if I say, me certain, say, she go come at the party later. Pronounce, spell it exactly. It's a S, right? That hard K sound, anytime you have K, it's spelled with a K. So as a result, the curtain you hang up on your window is not spelled C, it's spelled K, right? We have P, as in pillar. We have M, as in the word mango. We have N, as in nail. We have R, as in rat. We have S, as in so or so. We have T, as in tape. So I'm going to put tape over your mouth. We have Y, as in yes. We have Z. Now, how do the letter, what is the letter that Z, what is the letter that gives you that? And that's again where you get a variation. Because in some countries, and I'm not calling the name of the country, you say the letter is Z. In Jamaica, the letter is Z, right? So if you want to sound fancy, oh yeah, the consonant is Z. But in Jamaica, we say Z. Now, what we have as well, we have complex. The same we had complex vowels, we have complex consonants. And what make these consonants complex, again, is more than one consonant giving you that sound. Now, let me put a plug here. If you want to, if one of the things that we said we do on this channel is we do research. And in research, sometimes I want you to do your own research, and that comes through simply reading. One of an article that you can read that gives you a lot of details more than we are covering is an article by two linguists out of Mona, Hubert Devonish and Otelemate Harry. They have a paper on Jamaican Creole. Very interesting read. Now, if you read it and it seems too complex, ask your questions. That's what we are here for, to break it down. And in their article, they identified complex consonants as two consonants together. So, for example, the S and the H, as we spoke about earlier, in terms of sh. Exactly. So that's S and H together to give you sh. So when your mother tell you, no, short off of me, that sh sound, and the in Stanley and the Turbines, or depending on which version of the song. If you listen to Fab Five or Stanley and the Turbine, the song, they have a sad story to tell you. The song is called Shaving Cream. So that sh sound at the beginning, represented by SH. We spoke about the NG that gives you that sound already. So if you want to spell uncle, let me hear you attempt to spell the word uncle. Good. So that's A. So that's A. No. It's NG. So A, N, G, ang, and KL. Yeah, forget the E because you don't pronounce the E. So and this is what you're going to have to practice your spelling. We also have near. Yeah, near in words like nyam. That N-Y. Because if you don't have the yeah, that yeah sound, then you're going to say nam. And it's not, it's nyam. CH. Again, we give it words like ch. So when you want to spell throat, yes, and I know when you say throat, the song that comes to mind is Gage's song. When you spell throat, spell it CHUOT. That THROAT, no, that's English. In Jamaican Creole, that's your spelling. So we spell to capture the authentic pronunciation. Right? So we have a set of pronunciations that we are going to cover, and we are going to break that down in actual music, because as I said, as I mentioned in our introductory video, the music is going to be our data. And what we are going to do, we are going to see how musicians, the artists, your favorite artists, use their understanding, not necessarily conscious, sometimes subconscious understanding of the differences in Jamaican Creole and English to get their rhyme schemes down.